The air in Formosa that afternoon clung to my skin like a fever dream, thick and suffocating, as if the world held its breath. At 6 years old, I sat alone in our dim living room, my newborn sister's soft exhales, the only sound. Then came the knock, sharp, deliberate from the back door. My heart stuttered. Nobody ever used that door. The house felt too still, as if it were listening. My mother had left for the store hours ago, her absence a weight in my chest. Grandmother wasn't home either, leaving me to guard my sister's crib. Her tiny fists curled like secrets. The afternoon light bled through the windows, casting long shadows that seemed to pulse. I perched on the edge of the couch, my bare feet cold against the tiled floor, eyes fixed on the crib. The silence was heavy, unnatural, like the moment before a storm breaks. That's when it happened. A single crisp knock from the back door, slicing through the quiet like a blade. My breath caught. The back door led to the field, a tangle of tall grass and gnarled trees, where the world felt wild and untamed. Nobody came that way. Not ever. I froze my small hands, gripping the couch. Another knock, slower this time, as if testing my courage. "You're imagining it?" I told myself, but my body didn't believe me. My sister stirred a faint whimper escaping her lips, and I forced myself to move. I tiptoed toward the kitchen, the floor creaking under my weight, each step louder than the last. The back door loomed ahead, its frosted glass panel a blur of shapes. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering, and peeked through the window. What I saw stole the air from my lungs. A woman stood there, her silhouette framed by the dying light. She wore my mother's blue dress, the one with faded flowers, but it hung wrong, torn at the hem, streaked with dirt. Her hair, usually neat, was a wild mess, strands clinging to her face like spider webs. And her eyes, they weren't right. My mother's eyes sparkled warm and alive. These were dull, empty, like ponds, frozen over reflecting nothing. "Come, my love," she said, her voice a hollow echo of my mother's. "Let's go for a little while." The words slithered through the glass, wrapping around me like a cold hand. I flinched, my back pressed harder against the wall. It sounded like her, but it wasn't. My mother called me mi pequeño, never my love. And she never smiled, like that teeth too sharp, lips stretched too wide. This isn't her. My mind screamed, but my heart ached to believe it was. I clutched the doorframe nails, digging into the wood, torn between running to her and hiding. "No," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I'm not going." The figure tilted her head, unnaturally slow, like a puppet on strings. "It's okay. She coaxed her voice softer, now dripping with false warmth. Just for a little while. The words looped in my head, pulling at me, urging me to unlock the door. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. Don't listen. Don't move. Minutes crawled by, each one heavier than the last. She didn't knock again, didn't try the handle. She just stood there, motionless, her empty gaze boring into me. The field behind her seemed to darken the trees, twisting into shapes that weren't natural. I remembered a story my grandmother told me once about spirits that wore familiar faces to trick you, leading you into the dark where you'd never return. My chest tightened. What if she's one of them? I backed away, my bare feet slipping on the tiles, and ran to the living room. My sister was still asleep, oblivious to the terror choking me. I grabbed a blanket, wrapping it around us both, as if it could shield us from whatever was outside. The house groaned its walls, seeming to lean inward, and I prayed for my mother, the real one, to come home. Hours later, the front door clicked open. My mother's voice, warm and tired, called my name. I bolted upright, the blanket falling to the floor. She stood in the doorway, sweat glistening on her forehead, shopping bags in her hands. "Why are you shaking, mi pequeño?" she asked, frowning. I threw myself into her arms, sobbing the words spilling out about the knock, the woman, her empty eyes. My mother's face paled as she listened, her grip tightening. "I was at the store all afternoon," she said, her voice trembling. "I never went near the back door." She checked every lock, every window, but found nothing. No footprints in the dirt, no trace of anyone. Yet the air felt wrong, tainted, as if something had lingered too long. That night, I slept in my mother's bed, her arms around me. But sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the house made me flinch. Every shadow seemed to move. What was she? I wondered, my mind replaying those lifeless eyes. A spirit, a trick of the light, or something worse, something that knew my name and wore my mother's face. The back door became a forbidden place, a threshold I never crossed alone. Even now, years later, I avoid that field, its trees whispering secrets I don't want to hear. Sometimes, in the quiet of night, I hear her voice again, faint and distant, calling me to come with her. I lock my doors tighter, praying she'll never find me. But deep down, I know she's still out there, waiting. Every night, as the clock struck midnight, my sister Alice would wake up, trembling, her eyes locked on the doorway where a shadow wearing my face stood. Watching her, silent and unblinking. It wasn't me. I swear it wasn't. But for a whole year, something stole my likeness and haunted her, creeping closer each time, until one night it stepped forward and everything changed. I'm Lucas, and this is the story of a childhood terror that still claws at me. A fear so deep it makes me dread the mirror in the dark. The house we grew up in was old, its wooden floors groaning under every step, the air heavy with the scent of dust and forgotten summers. Alice and I were inseparable. Back then, two kids tangled in the chaos of youth sharing secrets, toys, and laughter that echoed through our shared bedroom. I was 6, maybe 7, when I got my own room. It felt like freedom, a badge of growing up my own space to dream without her chatter. But freedom came with a shadow, one I didn't see coming. The first hint was subtle, a crack in the warmth of our bond. Alice started acting strange, quieter, her eyes darting to corners when she thought I wasn't looking. One evening, as we sat cross-legged on the living room rug, the TV flickering with cartoons, she leaned close, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lucas, why do you watch me at night?" Her words hit like a cold wind, sharp and unexpected. I laughed, thinking it was one of her games. "What are you talking about?" "Alice, I'm asleep when you're asleep." But her face didn't soften. Her brown eyes, usually bright with mischief, were clouded, searching mine for something I couldn't grasp. "You stand at my door," she said, her voice trembling now, just staring. "Every night." "Why don't you say anything?" I froze, my laughter dying in my throat. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in the cartoon's colors, too bright against the sudden weight of her words. I told her she was imagining things, that I'd never do that. But her gaze lingered heavy with doubt, and for the first time, I felt a rift between us. That night, as I lay in my new room, the silence was different, thicker, like the air was holding its breath. I stared at the ceiling, picturing Alice in her room alone, watching the doorway for something that wasn't me. Days passed, and I tried to shrug it off. Kids have imaginations, right? Shadows turn into monsters. Creaks become footsteps. But Alice's words stuck, burrowing into my mind like a splinter. I started noticing her flinch when I entered a room, her hesitation before hugging me goodnight. It wasn't just a game anymore. Something was wrong, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was tied to me, even if I didn't understand how. Weeks turned into months, and Alice's accusations grew sharper. One night, I woke to her voice piercing the quiet, shrill, desperate. "Get out! Lucas! Leave me alone!" I bolted upright, heart pounding my room, lit only by the faint glow of a street lamp seeping through the curtains. I was in bed. I hadn't moved, but her screams carried down the hall, raw and terrified, each one a blade twisting in my chest. I ran to her room, bare feet slapping the cold floor, and found her curled in her bed, blankets clutched to her chin, eyes wide with fear. "Why do you keep doing it?" she sobbed. "Why do you just stand there?" I stood frozen in her doorway, the very place she claimed to see me. "Alice." "I was asleep," I said, my voice shaking. "I swear it's not me." But her eyes didn't believe me. They searched my face, looking for a lie, for proof of something I couldn't comprehend. Our dad appeared behind me, his face etched with worry. He checked the house, every corner, every closet, but found nothing. No one. Just the three of us in a house that suddenly felt too big, too empty. Alice's fear grew like a weed choking out the sister I knew. She stopped sleeping alone, begging to stay in our parents' room. She'd close her eyes to turn off the light, as if afraid to catch a glimpse of whatever stood in her doorway. I wanted to help her, to prove it wasn't me. But how do you fight something you can't see? I started lying awake at night, staring at my own doorway, half expecting to see a shadow staring back. The house felt different now, its corners darker, its silence heavier. I'd catch myself holding my breath, listening for footsteps I never heard, wondering if something was watching me too. The worst came a year later, when I was 7. Alice and I were older, but the distance between us had grown. She barely spoke to me anymore, her laughter replaced by a quiet wariness. I hated it, the way her eyes flicked to me, then away like I was a stranger. That night, I was asleep in my room, dreaming of nothing, when her scream shattered the silence. It wasn't just fear. This time, it was pure terror, the kind that makes your blood run cold. I stumbled out of bed, heart hammering, and ran to her room. But before I could reach her, I heard her voice, broken and pleading. "Dad, get Lucas out of here." I stopped dead in the hallway, my bare feet rooted to the floor. The air felt thick, like I was wading through fog. Dad burst out of his room, his face pale, and pushed past me to Alice. She was sobbing, pointing at the doorway where I stood, now her eyes wild. "He's there. He's coming closer," she screamed. I turned, expecting to see nothing but the darkness in her room, felt alive, pulsing with something I couldn't name. Dad grabbed her, holding her tight, his voice low, and urgent. Alice Lucas is asleep with me. Those words stopped time. I wasn't in my room. I was standing right there in the hallway, but Dad's voice echoed in my head, clear and certain. I hadn't been in my bed. I'd been with him in their room, asleep. My knees buckled, and I leaned against the wall, the wood cold against my palm. If I was asleep, then what had Alice seen? What had stepped toward her, wearing my face, moving closer, until she screamed? The house was silent after that. But it wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of something waiting, holding its breath. Dad carried Alice to their room, and I followed, my mind racing. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor, watching the doorway, my heart pounding with every flicker of shadow. Alice clung to Dad, her sobs fading into whimpers. I wanted to ask her what she saw, but the words wouldn't come. I was afraid of her answer, afraid it would confirm something I couldn't face. After that night, Alice was never the same. She refused to sleep in her room, staying with our parents or keeping the light on its harsh glow, spilling into the hall. She developed a ritual, closing her eyes as she flicked the switch, as if shutting out the world could keep that thing away. We were agnostic, never prayed, but Alice started whispering words to a God she didn't believe, in her voice soft and desperate in the dark. I'd hear her through the wall, her prayers a fragile shield against whatever haunted her. I tried to talk to her, to bridge the gap that had grown between us. But she'd look at me with those eyes, wary, searching, like she wasn't sure who I was. Years later, when we were older, we sat in a coffee shop far from that house. The clink of cups and hum of voices, a stark contrast to our childhood silence. Her voice broke as she told me everything, tears welling as she relived it. It looked like you, Lucas, she said. Every night for a whole year, I saw you in the doorway. But it wasn't you. It was wrong, covered in shadow, like the light couldn't touch it. Your face, but empty. No expression, just watching. Her words dug into me sharp and cold, anchoring the fear that never left. She described the figure's silhouette, how it stood motionless, its eyes locked on her, unblinking. The last night it moved, stepping toward her bed, slow and deliberate, its shadow stretching across the floor. She screamed until Dad came, and it vanished. But the fear stayed etched into her bones. She still prays every night, she said, because she's afraid it'll come back. I listened, my coffee growing cold, my hands trembling. I wanted to tell her I'd protect her, that I'd never let it happen again. But how could I, when I didn't understand what it was? Was it a doppelganger? Some twisted, mirror of me. A skinwalker, like the stories I'd read online. Or just her imagination, fueled by the dark corners of our old house. I didn't have answers, only questions that kept me awake, staring into the night, wondering if something was staring back. Now, years later, I'm grown, but the unease clings to me like damp air. I've never seen what Alice saw, never felt the presence she described. But knowing something used my face to terrify her. It's a weight I can't shake. I catch myself avoiding mirrors at night, afraid of what I might see. Not my reflection, but something else, something wearing my skin, watching me with empty eyes. The thought sends a shiver down my spine, a cold that settles deep in my chest. I've tried to rationalize it. Maybe Alice's fear was a child's mind playing tricks, shadows turning into monsters. But her tears, her prayers, the way she changed, they're too real to dismiss. And Dad's words that night, "Lucas is asleep with me," echo in my mind, a reminder that something was there, something that wasn't me. I've read about doppelgangers, omens of death or deception, and skinwalkers, creatures that steal faces to hunt. I don't know what to believe, but I know this. I'm afraid. Afraid that whatever it was might come back. Afraid it's still out there, waiting. Every night, as I turn off the light, I feel it the pull to check the doorway, to make sure nothing's there. I don't pray like Alice, but I understand why she does. Some fears don't fade. They grow roots twisting through your life until they're part of you. This is mine. This is ours. And somewhere in the dark, I wonder if it's still watching, wearing my face, waiting for the right moment to step closer. Okay. The road stretched endlessly before me, a ribbon of asphalt swallowed by the desert night. I was alone, bone-tired, and the hum of my car's engine had lulled me into a fragile sense of safety. But out there, in the shadows, beyond the headlights, something was waiting, something that knew I was vulnerable. The move to Las Vegas was supposed to be a fresh start. I'd packed my life into the back of my beat-up sedan, left behind a small town that held more ghosts than promises, and driven cross-country with nothing but a playlist of old rock songs and a thermos of bitter coffee. By the time I reached Nevada, my eyes burned, my back ached, and the dashboard clock glowed 1:17 a.m. My new apartment's keys wouldn't be mine until morning, and a hotel room felt like an extravagance I couldn't afford. So I pulled into a pilot travel stop just outside the city, a neon-lit oasis in the middle of nowhere. Rows of trucks and vans lined the lot, their drivers likely asleep, dreaming of highways or home. I chose a spot near the main building where the fluorescent lights spilled a pale glow across the pavement. It felt safer there, closer to the hum of civilization. I reclined the driver's seat, pulled a thin blanket over my shoulders, and let exhaustion drag me under. Sleep came fast, but it didn't. An hour later, my eyes snapped open, heart hammering in my chest. Something had woken me. Not a dream, not a noise I could name, but a primal instinct that screamed, "You're not alone." I lay still, breath shallow, straining to hear over the thud of my pulse. Then I caught it, the soft crunch of gravel underfoot, right outside my door. My head turned slowly, eyes darting to the window. A figure was moving away, his silhouette vague against the dim lights. He was tall, lanky, wearing a faded jacket that hung loose on his frame. Before I could process it, he stopped, turned, and saw me staring. His hand lifted in a small wave, casual, almost friendly. My stomach twisted. Nobody waves like that at 2 a.m. in a deserted parking lot. He started walking back toward my car, his boots scuffing the pavement with deliberate steps. I sat up, blanket sliding to the floor, my hand fumbling for the keys, still dangling in the ignition. The man leaned down, his face half-shadowed, and tapped on the window. "Hey, man, sorry to wake you," he said, his voice muffled through the glass. "My car won't start. Can you give me a jump?" His eyes glinted in the light, too wide, too eager. I hesitated, my mind racing. I was half asleep, disoriented, but something about his tone felt off, like he was reciting a script he'd used before. Sure. Yeah, I guess," I mumbled against my better judgment. "Great," he said, his grin flashing too many teeth. "Follow me around here. Follow him. Into the dark, where no one could see." I should have driven away right then. Every nerve in my body screamed to hit the gas and peel out of that lot. But I didn't. Maybe it was the fog of sleep, or some stubborn part of me that didn't want to seem paranoid. I started the engine, the rumble steadying my nerves, and eased the car forward, following the man as he walked toward the far edge of the lot. The lights from the main building faded behind me, replaced by the looming shapes of trucks and a chain-link fence that marked the boundary of the lot. The air felt heavier here, thick with the scent of diesel and something sour, like rotting trash. The man kept glancing back, waving me on, his movements jerky, almost impatient. He led me to the last row, a shadowy corner where the pavement gave way to weeds and gravel. There, tucked against the fence, was an old RV, its paint peeling, windows smeared with grime. Next to it sat a pickup truck, its bed piled high with garbage bags and rusted junk. The man stood near the truck's hood, holding jumper cables like a prop, waving me closer. My headlights caught the scene. In stark relief, the RV's door half open, the truck's bumper dented, and the man's face now fully lit, pale and slick with sweat. I stopped my car halfway down the row, my grip tightening on the wheel. This is wrong. Get out. Now. I could have backed up. The path was clear, the engine still running, but I didn't move. Not yet. My eyes scanned the shadows, searching for answers. That's when I saw her, a woman stepping out of the RV, her movements slow, almost predatory. She was thin, her hair tangled, wearing a stained tank top and shorts that looked too small. Her eyes locked on my car, and she started waving, mimicking the man's gesture, urging me to pull closer. My chest tightened. 2 of them now. No one else around. The lot was silent, save for the low hum of my engine and the faint buzz of a dying street lamp. I rolled down my window, just enough to shout, "No, I'm not pulling in there. If the cables can't reach, find someone else." My voice cracked, betraying the fear I was trying to hide. The woman's face twisted, her waving hand dropping as she screamed, "Just pull up, you idiot!" Her voice was raw, jagged, like she'd been shouting for hours. The man snapped at her. "Shut up! Get back inside!" He stormed over to her, their voices dropping to a heated whisper I couldn't make out. My hand reached for my phone, fingers trembling as I grabbed it from the passenger seat. Next to it was a can of pepper spray, a last-minute gift from my sister before I left home. I clutched it, the cold metal grounding me. The man turned back to me, his expression shifting to something softer, almost pleading. He walked to my driver's side, leaning close enough that I could smell the stale cigarette smoke on his breath. "Just pull up closer to the truck," he said, his voice low, insistent. "We'll hook up the cables, and we're done. I gotta get to my mom's house. She's sick, you know." His words dripped with rehearsed sincerity, but his eyes betrayed him. Cold, calculating, watching my every move. I shook my head, my voice steadier now. "Nah, I'm not helping with this. You're not safe. Leave, now." His face hardened, a flicker of anger passing through his eyes. "Seriously," he said, his tone sharper. "You're gonna leave me stranded." I didn't answer. I shifted into reverse, the car lurching backward. My headlights swept across the RV, catching the woman, standing in the doorway again. She was pointing at my car, shouting something I couldn't hear. Her face contorted with rage. The man didn't move, just stood there, watching me back away. I didn't wait to see what they'd do next. I spun the wheel tires, crunching over gravel, and floored it toward the exit. The neon lights of the pilot sign loomed ahead, a beacon pulling me back to safety. My heart was still racing as I merged onto the highway, the lot shrinking in my rearview mirror. I drove until I found a well-lit gas station closer to the city, its lot bustling with late-night travelers. I parked under a floodlight, locked the doors, and sat there, pepper spray still in hand, replaying the night in my head. Had they really needed help? Or was it something worse? A trap? A robbery? Or something I didn't want to imagine? The man's eyes, the woman's scream, the RV's open door. They burned into my memory, a warning I'd never forget. The next morning, I picked up my apartment keys and tried to move on. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd brushed against something dark, something that thrived in the shadows of places like that lot. I'd made a mistake, letting exhaustion cloud my judgment, following a stranger into the dark. I wouldn't make it again. Every time I pass a rest stop, now I see that RV in my mind's eye, its door ajar, waiting for someone else to pull in too close. You think you're safe out there on the open road, but the night has eyes, and it's always watching. Years ago, my uncle told me a story from his trucking days, one I'd laughed off until that night. He'd stopped at a rest area in Arizona, much like the pilot, and woken to a woman tapping on his cab, asking for a ride. She was young, desperate, her clothes torn. He almost let her in until he saw her hands, calloused and scarred, clutching a knife behind her back. He locked the doors, started the engine, and drove away, her screams fading in the distance. The road's full of traps, he'd said. Trust your gut, or you won't make it home. I hadn't understood then. Now I did. That night at the pilot wasn't just a close call. It was a lesson carved into my bones. The world isn't as safe as you think. There are places, dark corners, empty lots, where the rules don't apply, where people like that man and woman wait for someone to make a mistake. I'd walked right up to the edge of their world and barely made it back. As I sat in that gas station, the first light of dawn creeping over the horizon, I made a promise to myself: never again. Never let the night catch me off guard. Because out there in the shadows, something's always waiting. My phone buzzed at midnight, the screen's cold light slicing through the darkness of my dorm. A Facebook message from a stranger claiming to be my cousin from Belgium. His words were polished, almost too perfect, but beneath them lurked something unsettling. like a smile hiding teeth. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the reply button, unaware I was opening a door I could never fully close. I was a sophomore in college, caught in the whirlwind of exams and a turbulent relationship with my boyfriend, stationed far away with the Army. Our New Jersey home was my refuge, a place of noisy dinners and familiar comforts. The message came out of nowhere. A second cousin on my mom's Sicilian side, a year older, named only as cousin in our family's vague stories. He'd taught himself English, he said, rapping along to Eminem, and wanted to visit. My mom, eager to bridge the gap with distant kin, welcomed him for a few weeks. I was curious, picturing late-night talks about music or shared roots. He arrived with a single suitcase, his pale skin stark against jet-black hair, his frame thin like a runway model. We shared meals, laughed with my friends, and wandered the neighborhood's quiet streets. But his charm felt rehearsed, his eyes too intense, lingering on me in ways that made my skin crawl. I told myself it was nothing, just a clash of cultures. But the house began to feel smaller with him in it. His words turned sharp, slicing into my sense of safety. It started subtly, a comment about my tight jeans. Bet your boyfriend can't keep his hands off you. I forced a smile, my stomach twisting, but he didn't stop. Each remark grew bolder, his tone dripping with something I couldn't name. Then came the photo, sent to my phone. Late one night, a blurry snapshot of me as a toddler, naked in a bathtub, with a caption, "Look, you bear." My breath stopped. The image was private, tucked away in an old family album. How had he found it? I stormed to my mom, heart pounding, but she brushed it off. "He's just a weird European," she said, her voice light, as if my fear was childish. Her dismissal burned, and I began avoiding him, slipping through the house like a ghost. He noticed his frustration flaring. One night, after he accused me of running off to be loose, I snapped our shouts, echoing through the house. I missed my boyfriend's weekly call, slamming my bedroom door and collapsing onto the bed, tears soaking my pillow. The room felt heavy, like the air was pressing down, and I fell into a dream where the house was alive, its walls pulsing with a low, mournful hum. I woke at exactly 3 a.m., my heart a drum in my chest. A sharp sound had ripped me from sleep. The glass frame above my bed, a photo of me and my little brother, now shattered on the floor, its pieces catching the moonlight like broken teeth. The room was too still, the silence thick with presence. I reached for the lamp, my fingers trembling, and froze. Water dripped in the bathroom, a slow, deliberate rhythm. though I hadn't touched the faucet. Then, faintly, a gospel hymn drifted through the air, its notes low and sorrowful, coming from nowhere. My skin prickled, every nerve screaming to run. I stumbled to the living room, curling up on the couch, clutching a blanket like a shield. Morning came, and at breakfast, my cousin sat across from me, his smile sharp, his eyes darker than I remembered, almost black. "Rough night?" he asked, his voice smooth, but the words felt like a taunt. I couldn't speak, my throat tight, his gaze a weight I couldn't shake. The house became a stranger, my room, its heart of darkness. Every night I'd wake at 3 a.m., the same moment as if summoned. The air in my room grew thick, oppressive, like breathing through cloth. One afternoon, a friend stopped by, pausing at my doorway. "This place feels wrong," she whispered, her eyes wide, and left soon after. I couldn't disagree. The room seemed to watch me, its corners alive with unseen eyes. Then came the mirror. I was applying makeup one night, bleary from an all-nighter, when I glanced at my phone. Looking up, I saw it, a handprint, impossibly large, smeared across the mirror's surface, its edges fresh, as if pressed moments ago. My scream died in my throat. I staggered back, knocking over a cup of pencils that flew across the room, scattering like they'd been hurled by an unseen hand. Panic clawed at me, and I called my mom. We summoned a priest the next day, a man with tired eyes, who sprinkled holy water and prayed over the mirror. Mid-prayer, he flinched, his voice faltering. "This is a portal," he muttered, his face pale. The air grew heavier, the hymn returning at night, louder, now joined by crashes that shook the walls. My little brother spoke of monsters in my room, his dreams haunted. Then the calls began, my mom's phone ringing from my dead father's number. Silence on the line. We traced it. The number was disconnected, impossible. When he left, we found his secrets buried in the guest room. We searched his space, desperate for answers. A receipt for a gospel CD, its title inked in red. A package from a Vermont funeral home, heavy and unmarked, its contents a mystery. My grandmother, who'd clutched her crucifix around him, swore he moved too fast, appearing across the house, in moments his eyes black as voids. The religious statues in his room were turned to face the wall, their gazes hidden. A second exorcism, more intense, finally silenced the disturbances, but the house felt scarred. Months later, he appeared at my college, unannounced, his chest marred with bloody scratches, his voice pleading for confession. My mom and the priest, met him at a Starbucks, but he denied everything. His eyes flat, his words hollow. "I sold my soul to be beautiful," he'd once said, laughing. I didn't believe him then, but now I wasn't sure. We blocked him, cutting all ties, but his presence lingered like a stain. The mirror in my room is covered now, draped with a cloth I never remove. I lock my door each night, checking the corners, listening for that hymn. The house is quiet, but not peaceful. Sometimes in the stillness, I feel it a presence, patient waiting. My family avoids my room, and I can't blame them. Whatever came with him didn't leave, and I fear it never will. Look in the mirror, a voice in my mind whispers, but I never do. I'm too afraid of what might look back. The forest swallowed us whole that night, its darkness a living thing, and from the shadows, two glowing blue eyes, human, yet not locked onto me, pulling at my soul. It was Friday the 13th, a night I thought would be a playful adventure, with my boyfriend chasing raccoons through the woods near his dorm. Instead, we found something ancient, something that didn't belong, and it wanted us to stay. I'm still haunted by the urge to return by the tears. I couldn't stop, and by the question that lingers what was watching us in the dark. The air was crisp that October evening, heavy with the scent of damp leaves and pine. My boyfriend and I had been cooped up too long, craving something wild to break the monotony of college life. We both loved animals. Raccoons with their bandit masks, possums with their sneaky grins. So when I suggested a night hike in the woods behind his dorm, his eyes lit up. "Let's do it," he said, grabbing his jacket. We ate a quick dinner at a diner, the neon glow of its sign buzzing in the quiet town, then drove to the trailhead. It was around 10, the sky, a deep velvet black stars hidden behind clouds. The woods loomed ahead, their edges soft in the moonlight, inviting yet secretive. I felt a thrill, the kind you get when you're about to uncover something hidden. We parked our sneakers crunching on gravel and stepped onto the trail, my phone's flashlight cutting a thin beam through the dark. The forest was alive at first, a symphony of rustling leaves and distant owl calls. We walked side by side, our breath visible in the cool air, joking about spotting a raccoon stealing snacks. About 2 miles in, I caught movement, a flash of motion across the path. A deer, its antlers sharp against the shadows, leaped into the bushes, gone in a heartbeat. "Look, a deer," I said, pointing, but my boyfriend squinted into the dark, seeing nothing. "You sure?" he asked, his voice light, but curious. I nodded, the image vivid, its eyes glinting, its body sleek. He shrugged, and we kept going, the trail narrowing, the trees pressing closer. The forest felt different now, its sound softer, as if it were listening to us. 4 miles in, maybe 5, the path grew unfamiliar. My boyfriend stopped, his brow furrowed. "I run this trail every morning," he said, his voice low, "but I don't know where we are." My stomach tightened. The dark was absolute, our flashlight beams swallowed by the void. The trail was gone, replaced by tangled roots and tall grass. "Let's try this way," he said, pointing to a faint path veering right. I nodded, but unease settled in my chest, heavy and cold. The forest was too quiet now, the owls silent, the rustling gone. It was as if the world had paused, holding its breath. I walked ahead, my flashlight sweeping the brush, when a scent hit me, foul like rotting meat mixed with wet earth. I gagged, covering my nose, but didn't say anything, not wanting to alarm him. Then I saw them. 2 glowing blue eyes, impossibly high, 9 feet off the ground, staring straight through me. I froze my flashlight, trembling in my hand, its beam locked on the brush. The eyes weren't animal. They were human-shaped, too large, too bright, radiating a cold, otherworldly light. My boyfriend bumped into me, his voice sharp. "What's wrong?" I couldn't speak, my throat tight, my heart slamming against my ribs. "Look," I managed my voice, barely audible, pointing the light. He followed it, then froze. "Look up," I said, and his gaze lifted. The eyes shifted, scanning from me to him, deliberate, calculating. Whatever it was tall, impossibly thin, its form barely visible in the dark, a skeletal silhouette wrapped in shadow limbs, bent at wrong angles. Time stretched, the world narrowing to those eyes. They held me, pulling at something, deep inside, a whisper in my mind, urging me to step closer. I stood there, locked in their gaze, my body heavy, my thoughts sluggish. My boyfriend grabbed my wrist, his grip bruising. "We need to go," he said, his voice cracking. The second he spoke, the thing moved. Not fast, but crooked, like a puppet jerked by invisible strings, its limbs folding unnaturally as it stepped toward us. My flashlight caught glimpses, skin like ash stretched tight over bone fingers, too long, curling like claws. The air grew colder, the smell stronger, choking me. I stumbled backward, my eyes still on those glowing orbs, unable to break away. He pulled me, dragging me down the path, my feet tripping over roots. I walked backward, my flashlight shaking, watching the thing stalk us. It didn't run, didn't need to. It glided through the tall grass, its eyes never leaving us, its movements silent despite its size. The forest was dead quiet, no wind, no animals, just our ragged breaths and the thud of our steps. Then came the sound, a low, guttural chant, like someone praying in a language I didn't know, rising from the dark. It wasn't us. I don't know what I was saying, but my lips moved words, spilling out desperate pleading. My boyfriend's grip tightened, his face pale in the flashlight's glow. "Keep moving," he said, but his voice trembled. We turned left, retracing our steps, the path faintly familiar now. The thing followed its eyes, bobbing in the dark, always just out of reach. My chest burned my legs heavy, but I couldn't stop. The chanting grew louder, joined by a scream. Not ours, but piercing, inhuman, tearing through the night. It came from everywhere, echoing in my skull, making my vision blur. Tears streamed down my face, hot against the cold air. But I didn't know why I was crying. My body screamed to run, but my mind whispered to turn back, to go to those eyes, to let them take me. I fought it, clinging to my boyfriend's hand, his warmth the only thing keeping me grounded. The forest began to wake as we neared the trailhead, the sounds of crickets and wind returning, faint at first, then louder. The smell faded the air lighter, but the eyes were still there, watching from the edge of the trees. We broke into a run, the gravel of the parking lot crunching under our feet, the car a beacon in the dark. We dove inside, locking the doors, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. As we peeled out, a final sound cut through a shriek, high and jagged, like a wounded animal fading into the night. I looked back, expecting to see those eyes, but the forest was empty, its shadows swallowing everything. We drove in silence. The hum of the engine, the only sound. I couldn't stop crying, my hands trembling in my lap, my eyes drawn to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see those blue orbs glowing behind us. My boyfriend reached for my hand, his knuckles white. "What was that?" he whispered, his voice raw. I shook my head, unable to answer, but the urge was still there, a pull in my chest, whispering to go back to find it again. I didn't tell him, afraid saying it aloud would make it real. He mentioned names, Skinwalker Wendigo, words I'd heard in stories, but never believed. "That deer you saw," he said, "I didn't see it. What if it wasn't a deer?" His words chilled me. The memory of the deer's glinting eyes, flashing in my mind, too sharp, too knowing. Back at the dorm, I sat on his bed, staring at the window. the forest beyond it, a black void. The tears kept coming unbidden, my body shaking with a fear I couldn't name. I wanted to forget to laugh it off as a trick of the dark, but those eyes were burned into me, their light searing my thoughts. The silence of the forest, the smell, the chanting, they weren't natural. Something was out there, something old, something that saw us and wanted us to stay. I've never gone back to those woods, but the urge lingers, a quiet voice in the dark, calling me to return. I dream of those eyes, glowing in the shadows, watching, waiting. And I wonder if it's still out there, its crooked form hidden in the trees, knowing my name. Dun. The air in the basement was always heavy, like it held secrets older than the house itself. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, feeling the darkness press against my skin. Then it started the sound that made my blood run cold, a door slamming shut, echoing through the walls like a warning. I was 17, living in the basement of my parents' house, a cramped space I'd claimed as my own. It was my refuge with its concrete walls, a beat-up couch, and a second-hand TV that flickered when it rained. But it was also a place that felt wrong. The air was stale, thick, with the scent of damp earth, and something metallic I couldn't place. My room was at the far end, past a narrow hallway, lined with shelves of forgotten junk, old paint cans, Christmas lights tangled like spider webs, and boxes of my mom's high school yearbooks. The basement door, a heavy wooden slab at the top of the stairs, was the only way in or out. It had a brass handle that rattled when you touched it, a sound I'd grown to hate. It started with my mom. One afternoon, she cornered me in the kitchen, her arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "Are you mad about something?" she asked. "You keep slamming that basement door when you come home." I frowned, confused. I hadn't slammed anything. I was careful with that door. It was loud, and I didn't want to wake my dad, who worked nights and slept on the couch most days. I told her as much, but she just shook her head, unconvinced. "I hear it every day right after you get back from school," she said. "It's driving me crazy." I shrugged it off, figuring she was stressed. But her words stuck with me, a splinter in my mind. That night, I was sprawled on the couch, playing some old video game, my headphones blasting punk rock to drown out the hum of the furnace. My dad was asleep upstairs, his snores filtering through the floorboards. Mom was in bed, probably reading one of her mystery novels. The house was quiet, or as quiet as an old place like ours ever got. Then I heard it, a sharp, deliberate thud that vibrated through the basement. The door. It had slammed shut hard enough to make the shelves rattle. I yanked off my headphones, my heart kicking into overdrive. The game's music looped faintly in the background, but all I could focus on was the silence that followed, thick and unnatural. I stood, my socks catching on the rough carpet, and crept toward the stairs. The hallway stretched before me, dimly lit by a single bulb that flickered like it was on its last breath. I listened, holding my breath, waiting for something. A creak, a footstep, anything to explain it. Nothing. Just the hum of the house mocking my unease. I climbed the stairs, each step groaning under my weight, and checked the door. It was closed, the handle cold under my palm. I turned it, expecting resistance, but it opened smoothly. The living room was dark, my dad still snoring on the couch. No one else was there. I closed the door, my hands shaking, and went back downstairs. Maybe it was the wind, I told myself. But the air outside had been still all day. Listen, the house knows you're here. It's watching. The next day, it happened again. I got home from school around 4, dropped my backpack by the stairs, and flipped on the TV. My parents wouldn't be back for another hour. I was halfway through an episode of some dumb sitcom when I heard it. Heavy footsteps, deliberate and slow pacing the floor above. My first thought was Mom home early from work. I called out, "Hey, you're back already?" No answer. The footsteps continued moving from the kitchen to the living room, then stopping right above my room. The ceiling creaked, like someone was standing still waiting. I grabbed the remote, muted the TV, and listened. Silence. I bolted upstairs, my sneakers pounding the steps, but the house was empty. Mom's van wasn't in the driveway. No one was home. That's when it started to get to me. The footsteps came every day, always, when I was alone. They'd pace the floor, sometimes stopping above my bed, as if whatever it was knew exactly where I was. Then came the voice. It was faint at first, a murmur I could barely make out, like someone whispering through the walls. One night, I was watching TV, trying to ignore the unease that had settled in my chest when I heard it, clear as day, my name called from the top of the stairs. It sounded like Mom, but off, too low, too hollow. I froze my hand, hovering over the remote. The voice came again, closer this time, as if it had moved into the hallway. "Come up," it said. My skin crawled. I didn't move. I couldn't. I told my girlfriend Sarah about it a few days later. We were in my room, skipping school, like we sometimes did, sprawled on my bed, with a bag of chips between us. She listened, her eyes wide, but I could tell she wasn't sure if I was messing with her. "Maybe it's just the house settling," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I wanted to believe her, to chalk it up to old pipes or my imagination. But then it happened again while she was there. I'd dozed off my head on her shoulder when she shook me awake, her face pale. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I blinked groggy. "Hear what?" She swallowed hard. "Your name. Someone said it. Twice." My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard it, but the look in her eyes told me she wasn't lying. "You're not alone. Something's here. It knows your name." The incidents piled up, each one stranger than the last. One morning, Sarah pointed to a thick glass mug on my nightstand, a gift from my sister, who worked at a brewery. "What happened to that?" she asked. I looked, and my breath caught. The mug was sliced clean in half, a diagonal cut so precise it looked like a laser had done it. The top half sat neatly beside the bottom, as if someone had taken a blade to it while we slept. I hadn't touched it. Neither had she. Another time, I woke up to Sarah staring at my face, her hand trembling as she pointed to my forehead. "What's that?" she said. I stumbled to the bathroom, my heart pounding, and saw them in the mirror, 3 red scratches running from my hairline to just above my nose. They stung when I touched them, fresh and raw. I hadn't felt a thing. Then there was the phone. I had an old flip phone, the kind with custom ringtones you had to download from sketchy websites. One morning, as Sarah and I sat in my room, we heard it a tinny version of my favorite song, blaring from somewhere in the basement. I grabbed my phone, confused, but it was silent in my hand. The sound kept going, growing louder as we followed it to a corner of the room. It was coming from inside the wall, clear and unmistakable. We pressed our ears against the concrete, the music vibrating through it. Then it stopped. Dead silence. Sarah grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "We need to get out of here," she said. We left spending the day at a diner, but the memory of that sound clung to me like damp clothes. The worst came a few weeks later. My buddy Jake and Sarah's brother Matt crashed at my place one night. We stayed up late playing video games, laughing to keep the basement's chill at bay. Nothing weird happened until morning. Matt woke us up, his voice shaking. He'd slept on the couch near an antique table we'd inherited from my great-grandmother. It was heavy, solid oak with a square top fastened to its base by screws and glued pegs. Somehow, the top and midsection were now 15 feet away, lying on the floor. like they'd been tossed. The base stood untouched, its screws intact, no sign of damage. Matt swore he hadn't moved it. He was a light sleeper, he said, and would have heard something. We stared at the table, the air thick with unspoken fear. "Did you drop kick it or something?" I joked, trying to break the tension. Matt didn't laugh. Later that day, as we headed upstairs to shoot hoops, Matt froze on the stairs. He shoved past me, running out of the house, his face drained of color. Outside, he was shaking nearly in tears. "I saw something," he said, "behind Jake, coming up the stairs. A ball of light or something. It was huge." Jake and I exchanged a look, but we didn't push him. We all knew something was wrong with that basement. "Look behind you. It's closer than you think." The final incident was the one that broke me. I'd come home late from a friend's house around 1 in the morning. My parents were asleep, their snores a familiar rhythm. I was in the kitchen heating up leftover pizza when a chill ran down my spine. I don't know why, but I felt compelled to walk into the living room. As I stepped through the doorway, I heard it, a voice, clear and sharp in my mom's tone, but not her cadence. "Where's he at?" it said. I froze my body, locked in place, my mind screaming that this wasn't right. Mom never talked like that, not even in her sleep. The voice had come from the couch where Dad was still snoring. I backed into the kitchen, my breath shallow, and fled downstairs. I locked my door, something I'd never done before, and sat on my bed, pizza forgotten. After that, the activity slowed. The footsteps faded. The voice stopped. The basement felt empty, like whatever had been there had moved on. It lasted a few months, a relentless siege of fear, and then it was gone. Sarah, Jake, Matt, my parents. We all experienced it, but we never talked about it after. I tried to rationalize it. Old house, bad wiring, my teenage imagination. But I couldn't explain the mug, the scratches, the table, the voice. I'm older now, more logical, but that basement still haunts me. I don't live there anymore, but when I visit, I avoid those stairs, because deep down, I know something was there, something that knew my name. Years later, my dad told me about his childhood home, a place he swore was alive. He'd wake up to footsteps in the attic, see shadows move where no one stood. Houses hold things, he said. Memories pain sometimes worse. He never believed in ghosts, but his eyes betrayed him. I think he knew what was in our basement. I think he heard it, too. The pain from my surgery was nothing compared to the weight that pressed into my bed that night. In the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, locked in my room, I felt it a presence, light as a breath stepping across my mattress. It wasn't my cats. They were outside the door. And yet something was here, watching me waiting. My body was a map of aches. Each stitch from the emergency surgery pulling tight as I lay in my darkened bedroom. The Appalachian hills outside were silent, their jagged peaks swallowing the moonlight, leaving only a faint silver glow to pierce the curtains. I'd locked the door to keep my 2 cats out their playful paws, too much for my fragile state. The room smelled of antiseptic and pine, a reminder of the hospital and the wilderness that cradled this house. I positioned myself carefully on my side, facing the old wooden dresser, my back to the empty center of the bed. Every breath was a battle, the pain a constant companion, but I clung to the hope of sleep. The silence was oppressive, thick with the weight of the mountains, as if the house itself held its breath. That's when I felt it, a subtle dip in the mattress, like the cautious step of a small animal. Right behind my spine, it moved again, deliberate, circling me. My heart lurched, pounding against my ribs, but I didn't dare turn. It couldn't be real. The pain meds were strong, clouding my mind, making shadows dance in my thoughts. But the sensation was undeniable. Light, rhythmic steps pressing into the bed, moving from my back to the foot, then creeping up the other side toward my face. My skin crawled, a cold sweat slicking my neck. I remembered my grandfather's tales, whispered over campfires, about spirits that haunted these hills, drawn to those too weak to fight back. "You're delirious," I told myself, clutching the edge of the blanket. But the steps continued, soft yet precise, as if testing my resolve. "Please, just leave me alone," I said aloud, my voice barely a whisper, trembling with pain and fear. "I'm trying to heal. I'm hurting." The movement stopped, the air growing heavy, as if the thing paused to listen. For a moment, I thought I'd won. The silence lasted 30 seconds, then shattered. The steps resumed slower now, each one sinking deeper into the mattress, closer to my chest. My breath caught my body, frozen despite the pain screaming through my stitches. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking, and switched on the flashlight, its beam slicing through the dark. I swept it across the room. Dresser door, curtains, all familiar, all empty. Yet the weight persisted, a presence I couldn't see pressing against the bed. "You're not welcome here," I said louder, my voice cracking with desperation. "I need to rest. Leave now." The steps halted again, the room falling into a stillness that felt alive, charged with something I couldn't name. I turned off the flashlight, sinking back into the pillows, my body trembling. But the air was wrong, thick, with an energy that clung to my skin like damp fog. I lay there, eyes wide, afraid to move, afraid of what might happen if I closed them. The mountains outside seemed to lean closer, their shadows whispering through the walls. Dawn came gray and unforgiving, but the fear stayed. I dragged myself to the kitchen, wincing with every step, and told my boyfriend over coffee. His face was soft, skeptical, but he listened as I described the steps, the weight, the way the room seemed to watch me. As I spoke, a sharp pain exploded in my temples, like a blade twisting in my skull. I clutched my head, gasping, and saw him flinch, his hand flying to his own temples. "It's happening to me too," he said, his voice tight, his eyes wide, with a fear that mirrored mine. "It doesn't want us to talk about it," I whispered, my heart racing. My grandfather's stories surged back entities that guarded their secrets, punishing those who spoke their names. "I'm sorry," I said to the empty room, my voice shaking. "I won't talk about you again." The pain vanished instantly for both of us, leaving a cold dread that settled in my bones. We sat in silence, the coffee growing cold, the weight of the unseen pressing between us. The house became a cage, its walls alive with secrets. I kept the bedroom door locked, but it was useless. Every night, I'd feel it, the faint dip in the mattress, the soft steps circling me. I started sleeping with the light on its harsh glow, a flimsy shield against the dark. My cats, once my constant companions, avoided the room, their eyes fixed on corners I couldn't see. My boyfriend urged me to move, but the mountains held me their vastness, both a comfort and a threat. I began noticing shadows that lingered too long, a faint pressure on the bed, even in daylight. One afternoon, I woke from a nap to the same sensation, steps light and deliberate moving across the mattress. I didn't speak, didn't move, just lay there, my heart pounding, praying it would pass. It did, but not before a chill brushed my cheek, like a breath too close, too real. I checked the carbon monoxide detector, desperate for a rational answer, but it was working its green light, mocking my fear. Now I live with the knowledge that something shares my space. I don't speak of it, not after the pain. The Appalachian nights are long, the mountains guarding their secrets. I lock the door, check the windows, but it's already inside. Close your eyes. A voice in my mind urges, soft and coaxing, but I fight it, afraid of what might be there when I wake. My recovery is slow, the stitches healing, but the real wound is deeper, carved by something I can't name. It's still here, I think, and I clutch the blanket tighter, knowing it's no protection at all. The mountains watch silent and ancient, and I wonder if they sent it, or if it's always been here, waiting for me to be weak enough to notice. In the dead of night, the empty room in our country house came alive with the sound of boots pacing in circles, faster and faster, until the door flew open and something rushed toward me. I was just a kid spending weekends in a house that felt wrong, a place too cheap for its size, hiding secrets in its shadows. My name's lost to that memory, but the fear isn't. This is the story of a home that wasn't ours, of a father who hid the truth, and of a terror that still grips me when I think of those locked doors. The house stood alone, miles from anywhere, surrounded by fields that stretched into the dark. My parents had split when I was young, and weekends meant staying with Dad. My brothers and me packed into his new place. He'd found a partner, a woman with 2 kids of her own, and they'd bought this house together, a sprawling, creaky thing in the middle of nowhere. It was too big for the price Dad said a steal. But even as a kid, I felt the catch. The air was heavy, thick, with the smell of old wood and damp earth, the kind that clings to your skin. The land around it was wild, overgrown with weeds, and an old barn loomed at the edge, its doors sagging, rusted tools and bird cages piled inside like relics of a forgotten life. Down the hill, a fire pit sat ringed by strange crystalline rocks, glinting in the sun, too perfect to belong there. My brothers and I smashed them open, hoping for fossils, but found nothing but sharp edges and questions. Why were they there? What had this place been? The house felt alive in a way I couldn't explain. The floors groaned underfoot, the windows rattled in their frames, and the hallways seemed to stretch longer at night. My brothers and I shared a room cramped but safe, while the other kids had their own. But when Dad's partner left, taking her kids with her, their room stayed empty, the door always closed. It was like the house had swallowed their presence, leaving a void that pulsed with something I couldn't name. The first few weeks after they moved out were quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that makes you listen harder. Dad tried to keep things normal, playing banjo music on the radio to lull us to sleep, its twang the only sound in a house that seemed to hold its breath. One weekend, everything changed. I was maybe 10, lying in bed, the banjo music soft in the background, its notes weaving through the dark. I fell asleep, dreaming of nothing, but woke hours later, my body tense, my skin clammy with cold sweat. The radio crackled with static, sharp and uneven. Not the usual clear signal. I blinked into the darkness, my heart thudding, the room still. The air felt heavy like a storm was coming, but the sky outside was clear, stars sharp through the window. I needed the bathroom, so I slipped out of bed, my bare feet cold on the wooden floor, the hallway stretching before me like a tunnel. The empty room was just ahead. Its door closed, a faint line of shadow beneath it. Then I heard it, the sound of boots, heavy and deliberate, pacing in circles inside that room. The rhythm was fast, relentless, like someone trapped, desperate to escape. I froze 5 feet from the door. My breath caught in my throat. The room was empty. No one lived there. No one should be there. The boots kept moving, the sound echoing in my skull, each step a hammer against my chest. I stared at the door, its wood warped and old, expecting it to stay shut, praying it would. But the pacing stopped, abrupt, the silence louder than the sound. My heart pounded. My eyes locked on that door, every muscle screaming to run. Then, without warning, it swung open the hinges, silent, the darkness beyond it, absolute. The boots rushed toward me fast, purposeful, the air shifting as if something was coming. I stumbled, my legs giving way, and fell hard, the floor cold against my palms. Panic surged, and I scrambled to my feet, running to Dad's room, my breath ragged. I burst in, shaking him awake, my voice high and frantic. Someone's in the house. They're in the empty room. Dad was up in an instant, his face hard, grabbing the shotgun from under the bed. He moved through the house, checking every door, every window, his steps heavy, deliberate. I followed my brothers half awake, their eyes wide in the dim light. The house was locked, every bolt in place, every window secure. No one was there. No sign of anyone. Dad's face darkened, his voice sharp as he turned to me. "No more video games," he said, his words clipped. "You're imagining things." But his eyes didn't meet mine, and I saw something there, fear maybe, or something he wouldn't say. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my gym, the banjo music off, the static gone, but the silence was worse. I kept seeing that door open, the darkness spilling out, the boots charging toward me. I wanted to believe, Dad, to think it was my mind playing tricks, but the sound was too real, too close. The house felt different now, its walls watching its shadows deeper. I avoided the hallway, the empty room, but the fear followed me, a weight I couldn't shake. Days passed, Then weeks, and nothing happened. The house stayed quiet, but it wasn't peace. It was waiting. Years later, when I was older, the memory still gnawed at me. I'd gotten into the paranormal reading about hauntings, entities, things that linger in old places. I told my brother about that night, the first time I'd spoken of it, my voice low, half expecting him to laugh. But his face changed, his eyes narrowing, and he leaned closer. That house was wrong, he said, his voice steady but heavy. I heard something too. My breath caught my skin prickling. He told me his story, one he'd kept hidden, locked away like that empty room. One night, when he was staying with Dad, he woke to a sound chains, heavy and rusted, dragging across the front porch, slow and deliberate, like something circling the house. He got up, heart pounding, and found Dad at the front door, the light-off shotgun in hand. Dad's face was pale, his eyes fixed on the darkness outside. "It's okay," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Go back to sleep." My brother did, but he never forgot, and neither did I. That story changed everything. Dad never believed in the paranormal, or so he said. But the way he stood at that door, the way he brushed off my story, it wasn't dismissal. It was protection. He knew something felt something, but he kept it from us, shielding us from a truth too heavy for kids to carry. I thought back to the house, its cheap price, its strange barn, those crystalline rocks. What had happened there? Who, or what, had left those marks, those sounds? The boots in the empty room, the chains on the porch. They weren't random. They were echoes, traces of something that didn't belong, something that hadn't left. Now, years later, I'm grown, but the house still haunts me. I've moved on, left that place behind, but I carry its weight. I dream of that hallway, the door swinging open, the boots rushing toward me. I wake up, heart racing, checking the shadows, half expecting to hear that sound again. Dad never spoke of it, not even when I asked. His answers short, his eyes distant. My brother and I don't talk about it much either, but we know. That house wasn't ours. It belonged to something else, something that paced in circles, dragged chains in the dark, and waited for us to notice. Every night, as I lock my door, I feel it, the pull to listen, to make sure nothing's moving out there. I don't know what was in that house, but I know it's still there, in those empty rooms, in those shadows, watching, waiting for someone else to call it home. The sun was sinking behind the trees, painting the park in shades of orange and gray. Laughter from a distant playground faded replaced by the hum of cicadas and the rustle of leaves. I sat on the curb, oblivious to the shadows, creeping closer, unaware that kindness could be a trap. The park was our usual haunt, a sprawling green space where my friend Mia and I escaped the monotony of teenage life. It was the biggest park in town, with winding trails, a murky pond, and patches of woods that felt wild despite the nearby streets. It wasn't exactly safe. Halfway houses and work release programs dotted the neighborhood, and you'd sometimes see sketchy types lingering on the benches. But it was ours. That afternoon, we'd met up with a couple of guys from school, hoping for some fun. They were boring, droning on about car mods and video games, so Mia and I zoned out, sitting cross-legged on the sidewalk, sharing a warm soda and trading sarcastic comments. The air was thick with late summer humidity, the kind that made your clothes cling to your skin. My sneakers scuffed the pavement, and I could smell the faint tang of cigarette smoke drifting from somewhere nearby. The park was quieter now, most families gone, leaving behind empty swings and crumpled wrappers. I glanced at Mia, her dark hair falling over her eyes as she smirked at something I'd said. We were in our own world, untouchable, or so I thought. That's when I saw her, a girl, maybe a year or two older than us, stumbling across the grass. She was barefoot, her jeans torn at the knees, her t-shirt stained with something dark. Her hair hung in greasy strands, and her shoulders shook like she was crying. She looked lost, broken, like someone the world had chewed up and spit out. My first instinct was to look away. Growing up in this town taught you to mind your business, but she was coming straight for us. Mia nudged me, her smirk fading. "What's her deal?" she whispered. I shrugged, but my stomach tightened. Something about the girl felt off. She stopped a few feet away, her breath hitching tears streaking her dirt-smudged face. Can I use your phone?" she asked, her voice small and trembling. Her eyes were red glassy, like she hadn't slept in days. I hesitated, my hand hovering over my pocket. I wasn't naive. I knew people could scam you, run off with your stuff, but she looked so desperate. Barefoot, no phone, no shoes. What kind of the trouble left someone like that? "Please?" she said, her voice cracking. "I just need to call someone." I glanced at Mia, who raised an eyebrow, but didn't object. "Okay," I said, pulling out my phone. "But I'm holding it." I unlocked the screen, ready to dial for her. She nodded, wiping her nose with the back of her hand, and stared at the phone like it was her lifeline. But when I asked for the number, Her face crumpled. I can't remember, she said, her voice rising in panic. She started crying again, harder this time, her hands clutching her hair. I don't know what's wrong with me. Stay calm. Don't trust her. Watch her hands. Mia shifted closer, her shoulder brushing mine. What happened to you? She asked, her tone cautious but soft. The girl sank to her knees, her story spilling out in fragments. She'd been out last night, she said, with a guy she barely knew. They'd gone for drinks, just for fun, but he got angry, violent. She couldn't remember what happened next, only waking up in a parking lot, bruised and disoriented. The hospital had treated her for a head injury she claimed, but refused her a rape kit and dumped her here because she couldn't give them an address. I'm sorry, she kept saying, rocking back and forth. I didn't mean to ruin your day. My chest ached for her. I knew what it was like to feel helpless, to be dismissed because of who you were. I'd grown up navigating this town's rough edges, dodging creeps and cops who didn't care. Mia and I exchanged a look, a silent agreement. We couldn't just leave her. We can call 911. I offered my thumb, hovering over the screen, but she shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. No police, she said. They won't help me. I'm black. They'll just lock me up again. Her words hit hard. I understood too well. I was Latina, and Mia was half Vietnamese. We knew how the system worked. Okay, no cops, Mia said, her voice steady. We'll get you some food, maybe a blanket. Then we'll take you to the hospital ourselves. We'll stay with you. The girl nodded, her sobs quieting, but her hands kept fidgeting, twisting the hem of her shirt. I noticed her bag, then a small, tattered backpack slung over one shoulder. She clutched it like it held everything she owned. Something about her eyes, the way they darted between us, made my skin prickle. But I pushed the feeling down. She needed help. We could handle this. We gathered some supplies from Mia's car, a hoodie, a water bottle, a granola bar, and promised to drive her to a nearby hospital. She didn't like the idea, her voice sharpening. I don't want to go back there, she said, her tears gone, replaced by a strange edge. Just take me to the store down the road. I know someone there. Mia frowned, but I nodded. It was only a few miles. We could do that much. As Mia went to get her car, the girl turned to me, her voice low. They'll put me in the psych ward again, she said, her eyes boring into mine. You won't let them, right? I froze, unsure what to say. Psych ward. She hadn't mentioned that before. We'll stay with you, I said, but my voice wavered. Doubt crept in cold and sharp. Don't follow her. You're walking into a trap. The drive to the store was tense. Mia gripped the wheel, her knuckles pale. I sat in the back with the girl, who kept her hand in her bag, her fingers moving, like she was searching for something. She stared out the window, muttering to herself, too soft for me to hear. The store was a run-down convenience shop, its neon sign flickering in the dusk. We pulled into the lot, and the girl pointed to the back, where a loading dock sat in shadows. There, she said, her voice flat. My heart raced. Why the back? Before I could ask, she was out of the car, running toward two men standing by a beat-up sedan. One of the men was tall, his face hard, his eyes cold as he watched her approach. She threw herself at him, crying again, but he didn't move, didn't comfort her. His hand gripped her wrist tight enough to make her wince. The other man, shorter, leaned against the car, smoking a cigarette, his gaze locked on us. Mia and I got out our instincts, screaming to leave, but we felt responsible. We had to explain, to make sure she was safe. She needs help. I started, my voice shaking. She said she was attacked. The tall man cut me off. We'll take care of it, he said, his voice smooth, too calm. You girls can come with us if you want. His eyes flicked over us, sizing us up. My blood ran cold. Mia stepped closer to me, her hand brushing mine. We can follow in our car, she said, her voice firm. We'll go to the hospital with her. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. Nah, we all ride together, he said, gesturing to his sedan. It was small, barely enough room for three, let alone four. The girl turned back to us, her face twisted in a mockery of tears. You said you'd stay, she said, her voice rising, accusing. She wasn't crying anymore, just glaring her hand still in her bag. I shook my head, backing toward our car. We'll follow you, I said, my voice cracking. She lunged at Mia, grabbing her arm, her nails digging in. You promised, she screamed, her face inches from Mia's. I grabbed her shoulder, trying to pull her off, but she was strong, her grip like iron. The tall man stepped forward, his hand closing around my wrist. You hurt her, didn't you? He said, his voice low, menacing. You're bringing her back to cover it up. Come with me, and we'll sort it out. Panic surged through me. I yanked my arm free, my skin burning where he'd touched me. Mia was struggling, the girl's nails drawing blood. Then Mia screamed a piercing, desperate sound that echoed through the lot. Heads, turned a couple of guys loading a truck nearby, pausing to look. The man's face darkened, and he shoved me away hard enough to make me stumble. He grabbed the girl, dragging her to his car, her screams fading as they sped off, tires screeching. We stood there, shaking our breaths, ragged. Mia's arm was bleeding red lines stark against her skin. I pulled her to our car, locking the doors as soon as we were inside. My hands trembled as I dialed 911, the operator's voice a lifeline in the chaos. We told her everything: the girl, the men, the store. The police called back days later, their words chilling. The girl had been at the hospital the night before, not for an assault, but for a mental health crisis and drug overdose. The man, no boyfriend, no family. He had a record aggravated kidnapping, multiple charges. They didn't know who he was to her, only that we'd been lucky. You wanted to help, but kindness can cost you everything. Mia's mom used to tell us about a scam she fell for as a kid back in Vietnam. A woman approached her at a market, crying, claiming she'd lost her son. She begged for money to buy a bus ticket to find him. Mia's mom, barely 10, gave her every coin she had. Later, she saw the woman laughing with a group of men counting the cash. People prey on your heart, her mom said. Don't let them. I'd rolled my eyes, then thinking I was smarter, tougher. Now I understood. That girl in the park hadn't just wanted our phone. She'd wanted us, our trust, our compassion, our mistake. We don't go to that park anymore. The memory of her eyes, her fake tears, the man's grip lingers like a bruise. I still see her in my dreams, standing in the shadows, her hand in that bag, her voice whispering my name. I wonder what would have happened if Mia hadn't screamed, if we'd gotten into that car. I don't want to know, but I do know the world is full of traps, and sometimes the kindest thing you can do is walk away. The new flat was supposed to be my fresh start, but at 3:30 a.m., it became a nightmare. I woke to see my friend standing by the wardrobe, his Scooby-Doo shirt glowing faintly in the dark, staring at me. Then I felt the bed shift. He was still lying next to me, asleep. My heart stopped. Who was standing there? Moving into the flat was a disaster from the start. At 19, I'd dreamed of independence, but the place was a mess. Dirty floors, a botched lease, my belongings delayed until tomorrow. The empty rooms echoed with every step, their bare walls looming like silent accusations. I called my friend, a 20-year-old I'd known since high school, to vent. He was good like that, always ready to listen, and offered to come over so I wouldn't be alone on my first night. The flatmate I'd share the place with wouldn't arrive for another week, leaving me in this hollow space that felt too big, too quiet. We grabbed food, laughed about the stained duvet left by the previous tenants, and tried to make the best to make the place feel like home. But as night fell, the flat grew colder, its shadows sharper, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. We decided to share my bed, the only furnished spot, the thin throw blanket, barely enough against the chill. The night wrapped around us heavy and watchful. I drifted into a restless sleep, the city's distant hum fading into silence. At 3:30 a.m., my eyes snapped open, a prickle of unease crawling up my spine. The room was dark, save for a sliver of street light slipping through the blinds, casting jagged lines across the floor. My friend's breathing was steady beside me, but something felt wrong. I turned my head slowly and saw him standing by the open wardrobe, his back to me, arms crossed tightly, as if cold. His Scooby-Doo shirt, the one he'd worn to bed, glowed faintly, the cartoon dog's eyes eerily vivid. His head was turned, his face half lit, staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. My throat tightened. "Hey, you okay?" I said, my voice barely audible. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared, his eyes too still, too empty. I laughed nervously, thinking it a prank. "Come on, man, back to bed." No response. The air grew thick, pressing against my chest, and I felt the bed shift beside me. My friend was still there, asleep, his chest rising and falling. That's when I knew it wasn't him. My heart hammered, a cold sweat breaking across my skin. I sat up, eyes locked on the figure by the wardrobe. It was him, same height, same messy hair, same damn shirt. But it wasn't. The details were wrong. His stance too rigid, his eyes too dark, like pools of ink swallowing the light. I remembered my uncle's stories, told over late-night card games, about doppelgangers, shadows that stole your face, omens of death or worse. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice shaking. The figure tilted its head, unnaturally slow, and I swear its mouth curved into a smile that wasn't human. I called my friend's name, louder now, desperate to wake him. "Wake up, man, please." He stirred, groaning, and I shook him, my eyes never leaving the figure. As he sat up, rubbing his eyes, the thing by the wardrobe began to fade, its edges blurring into the dark until it was gone. The wardrobe door stood open, a black void swallowing the light. Morning brought no relief, only answers I didn't want. My friend turned on the light, his face pale as I stammered out what I'd seen. He went quiet, his eyes distant, and then he told me the truth. Since he was a kid, something had followed him, a spirit, a shadow he didn't know what. It took the faces of family, friends, strangers, always appearing at night, always staring. His mom had seen it as his dad, his sister as their neighbor, but never as him until now. It's never done that before, he said, his voice low, his hands trembling. I don't know what it means. My stomach churned. Doppelgangers were bad luck. My uncle had said a warning of something coming. The flat felt different now, its emptiness a threat. We checked the wardrobe, finding nothing but dust and a faint smell of damp wood, but the open door haunted me. Why had it chosen his face? Why here in my new home? The city outside buzzed, oblivious, but inside the silence was alive. Watching, the flat became a prison, its walls closing in. I couldn't sleep, my eyes darting to the wardrobe every night, expecting to see him again, or worse me. My friend stayed over a few more nights, but the tension grew, his fear feeding mine. I started noticing things, footsteps in the empty hallway, a faint hum from the wardrobe, like a voice too low to hear. My belongings arrived, but even with furniture, the flat felt wrong, its corners too dark, its air too heavy. I researched online, finding stories of entities that fed on fear growing stronger with every glance. Don't look at it, the forums said, but I couldn't stop. One night, I woke to the wardrobe door ajar, a shadow flickering inside. I didn't call out, didn't move, just watched until dawn, my heart pounding. My friend suggested a cleansing ritual, salt sage prayers, but I wasn't sure it would work. This thing wasn't tied to the flat. It was tied to him, and now maybe to me. Now I live with the fear that it's not gone. I keep the wardrobe locked, the key hidden. But it doesn't matter. The flat is mine, but not mine alone. Every night, I check the shadows, waiting for his face or mine to appear. Don't look, I tell myself, but the urge is there, pulling me toward the dark. My friend avoids staying over his guilt, a silent weight between us. The city moves on, but I'm stuck, tethered to a thing I can't name. It's still here, I think, and I close my eyes, praying I won't see it when I open them again. But deep down, I know it's waiting, wearing a face it stole from someone I trust.